Sports Now. I'm Marky Billson. You heard a little bit about our paychecks there if you were listening on the radio. An added incentive. Forgot to turn the mic off right there. But yes. By the way, if you're that 38 Vols team, by the way, Ed Seifers from Bob's brother. Bob Seifers at Dobbins Bennett that year led the nation in scoring. It was reported at the time it was the all-time record for scoring in high school football. Actually, Red Grange, among others, had scored more in high school in a season. However, 1938, that's just not well reported. What do they know in Kingsport about Illinois 1920 high school football records? It's not all on the net in 1938, so something should be mentioned there. We actually were talking off the air about, how could you make the argument for 1896 being the greatest undefeated Vols team? Yeah, how could you do that? If you really wanted to. And it's awful, because, no one's some people might be around from 38. If you were born in 1930, you saw the Vols, or even you didn't see them, you read about them in the newspaper, listened on the radio, let's say you were born in 1930, and it was just when you were coming into being a sports fan, you just couldn't wait until that radio broadcast, when you're 8 years old or whatever, and, you just remember, and sure, when you're 8 years old, the athletes are all gods, and so they all stand 10 feet tall, and so that's your team. I get it. Okay, and so you're born that year. You'd be 89 years old now, so you might still be alive. I could see that. Maybe you went to a game. I could see that. The kid's there. However, not a whole lot. Who's left from 1896? Nobody, right? So how do you make the argument there? And I was trying to think, and I was like, is it fair to past generations that maybe we don't honor them enough? Now, also, I've talked about this. The first professional baseball league was not the National League. It was actually called the National Association. It existed, I think, 1870 to it was 1870 or 1871. I'd say 1871 to 1875. The tallest player in that league, a guy named Bob Armstrong, he was 6'2". It's actually a good example of today athletes are bigger and stronger. And in the 1920s, Wilbur Pete Henry was considered to be a gigantic football player. He weighed 250 pounds. He's in the Hall of Fame, Canton Bulldogs, give him credit, but, athletes are bigger and stronger today. That being said, I do believe, even if it's total sentiment, but I do believe somebody like, Honest Wagner, and I do believe that from hearing just stories of people that did see him play in my youth. No, I didn't see Wagner play I'm saying people, elderly people who saw Wagner play told me in my youth what he was, Art McKinnon told me he had the second most range of any shortstop he ever saw next to Ozzie Smith. Okay, so there you go. And he once saw every unassisted triple play in the history of the National League. So he would know. However, there aren't that many balls, and I don't know if we're, because we're not giving enough credit to those people that were around before we were born. If history, it's often said, history begins when you were born. Okay. The thing, I was trying to think about 19th century athletes who you might even talk about in a contemporary sense. Like, say, put on your all-time team. And that one gets to be kind of, and I was saying, okay, maybe you might take Cy Young because he won 511 games, and that's still the record. And he did pitch in the 19th century. Maybe you take that. Honest Wagner's career began in the 19th century. And a lot of people still take him as the all-time shortstop. he led the National League in 38 different statistical categories. I mean, it just along the line. So, I mean, yeah, he led the league in something 38 different times. So, I get that. Well, I'll say, In fact, it just came, I think yesterday was the, 133rd anniversary of Honest Wagner hitting an inside the park home run at the age of 42. So, I mean, you've got, it's like, this is an argument here that can be made. I mean, the stats still do, make a strong recommendation for this player. And so, so you've got that. But very few, very few. You might even consider looking back, because sports in the 19th century, what were they, You didn't have pro basketball back then, The sports page, if you look at it, was often really something of a tome of local recreation. So that would also, why you wouldn't, choose the 19th century player, obviously. But that's what I was thinking about. Of all the, and I'm one of these, like I said, obviously, I can tell you about Bob Armstrong and a baseball historian, but, I don't think there are that many people that take, Cap Anson as the all-time Cub. First guy to 3,000 hits. Some might take, Connie Mack did manage in the 19th century. John McGraw managed in the 19th century. You might take those guys. McGraw played. I don't think he managed. He played in the 19th century. You might take those guys, your all-time manager. But like I said, McGraw, he played. He didn't manage in the 19th century. So that would be a difficult one to do. If you took Connie Mack as your all-time manager, okay, yeah, he did he managed the Pirates for a couple of years in the 1890s, okay? So, but, yeah. There you go. Just wanted to put those things out. I guess one of the tragic news, I gotta mention this, was the athlete dying young. And I want to talk about this. And it was Tyler Skaggs. And I think I can get to this in the next segment, because I've actually got quite a lot to say about this. Just, horrible story, certainly. Everything from, this has happened to the Angels before, and not all that long ago, 10 years, to, how are they going to, what's their rotation going to look like? Which, I don't mean to sound callous, but yeah, if your starting pitcher dies, then how does that affect the team? That is one of the questions that is asked about that. Of course, they canceled the game yesterday between the Rangers and Angels, which is another, sign of baseball becoming more and more pro player. Now, I don't have a problem with canceling the ball game. I really, on the surface, I'm not sure that I have a problem with the sport becoming pro player. But, I'll talk about it here in a bit. By the way, you may also remember that Rob Bramblett, who was Auburn's broadcaster, and his wife Paula were killed in a car wreck a few weeks ago. There has been an arrest made. Jonathan Edward Taylor, 16 years old, that's all, of Auburn, Alabama, was charged on 2 counts of manslaughter, according to a release from the Auburn Police Department, Auburn, Alabama. Crash occurred on May 25th and the Shug Jordan Parkway near West Sanford Avenue. I've not been there, but if you have, that gives you an idea. The investigation said the crash concluded Taylor's vehicle was traveling at an excessive rate of speed, well over the posted 55-mile-an-hour speed limit when the crash occurred. Toxicologist analysis reported also confirmed the presence of marijuana in Taylor's system. Taylor is charged as an adult per Alabama Criminal Code and taken into custody at his home on Monday. He was transferred to Lee County Jail, where he is being held on a $50,000 bond. So, sad story there. regardless, there you are. But I wanted to mention that. Also, it has come out, I'm talking more about death. Yeah, we're going to be real positive subject here. Let's talk about death here. Okay. I should point this out here. Perhaps not death, thank goodness. You know, Santa Anita, we've been hearing about that. But the Kentucky Derby, horse racing now is becoming ubiquitous with death, thanks to Santa Anita. But, you know, Luis Saez, who, you know, disqualified from the Kentucky Derby, he blocked another horse last week. Yeah. There you go. Blocked another horse. You heard me. Saez was disqualified again Friday at Belmont Park in New York after making a similar move in the final stretch. Saez was riding Anne Dupree in the 7th race of the day. He made a move through the final turn across finish line in a 6-horse field, cut off enlisting and jockey Javier Castellano, who was inside on the rail. Castellano led Essling inside of Saez over the finish line, coming in second. They did an inquiry. Saez was dropped to 3rd place. And so there you go. Yeah, he was disqualified. Of course, yeah, veered in front of War of Will on maximum security in the Derby, and that was the first disqualification in the 145-year history of the race. It was 145th running of the race. There you go. So, is that going to go? I mean, it's nothing to see horses disqualify. You know, to have disqualifications in horse racing, you do start to wonder. I mean, is this going to dog, you know, Saez for the rest of his life? Every time he's disqualified, of course, did the same move. I'll just say this. I'd be surprised if Saez ever rode in the Kentucky Derby again. Say what you will. Of course, we had Teresa Gennaro, BrooklynBackstretch.com, really, and Forbes.com as well, talk about that. And she agreed with the disqualification in the Derby. So did I. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more Tyler Skaggs and the tragedy there after this.
And neighborhood for every